Well, welcome everyone to this week's Gospel Preview. I am Alex Leach, Director of Formation at Trinity Cathedral, and joining me is Eileen and Troy. Welcome. Thank you both
You.
for being here.
Thank
Our
you.
Gospel reading is from the Gospel of John. It is John 21, verses 1 through 19. It's a little bit of a longer Gospel, and so I am going to not try to put it in the chat, but I'm going to screen share so you can read along with me if you like. Um, as per usual, we will read the gospel once through, give ourselves a couple moments of silence and pause, and I invite you to just notice any words, phrases, ideas that pop out to you that capture your attention in this reading. Gospel according to John. Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, We will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, Children, you have no fish, have you? They answered, No. He said to them, Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, It is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and he jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with the fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, Bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, Come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, Who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. The second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, Follow me. Hmm. Stop. It's a long passage. There's a lot going on in it. But I'm wondering if there's any particular word, phrase, idea that particularly stood out to you.
This is probably a little not very impressive, but I've always wondered why Peter got dressed and jumped in the ocean.
Yeah,
It's like, I know he was naked, he got dressed okay, but then, jumped in the ocean. What was that all about? So,
yeah.
yeah.
I know our the I don't know what the right word is. The colloquial understanding, I'm not sure, is that Peter's like swimming to the shore, but it doesn't actually even say that. It just says he
Uh-huh.
jumps in the ocean. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Well, that part to me makes me like Peter. So I like that bit about when the other disciple said it's the Lord. For whatever reason, he puts on his outer garment, whatever that would be. I
Hmm.
guess modesty, I don't know.
Right.
Plunged into the sea, assuming he's swimming to shore too, uh, and not just bobbing there.
Right.
I don't know, right?
He makes it to shore. Yeah.
Yeah, by the end, they're at shore hauling in a net
Mhm.
Why does it make you like him even more?
because it is such a physical action, right? It's
Mm,
immediate. Um, we assume by this point Peter has heard something about the resurrection,
hmm
but the stories from somewhere. I don't know if in John's account he would have been present at an earlier appearance,
He
maybe.
may, yeah, he may have. I haven't, yeah, I'd have to look.
But it's like, what else would you do? If you're on a boat, you're thinking, okay, what's the fastest way to shore? Well, that's the risen Jesus. I'm jumping out of the car and rolling,
Yeah.
I'm getting out of the plane. I'm going over there.
Yeah.
I just like when those guys act like that. Those
Mm,
guys being like John and Peter, the disciples who were um, people. So
yeah. Mm.
it's also this is one of those stories it like comes so close to transcendent because Jesus appears,
Hmm.
and when they get to the shore, they don't even say they won't ask who he is because they know it,
Uh,
but they don't land and go, "Hey, Jesus!" Right? There's like this barrier there of
yeah.
something. I don't know what, but Peter's naked in the story,
Yeah.
or he puts his clothes on. They count the number of fish.
Yeah.
He feeds them on the shore. Like there's these very physical details, like that I want to say would not fit as easily in what I'll call a mythological account. Sounds
Mm-hmm.
like something that happened, and that is
Right.
mixed with what's happening. It's just absolutely incredible. It's just incredible.
Hmm. I like what you're saying, Troy. I mean, I like what both of you are saying, but it makes what you're saying, Troy, makes me think about how physical resurrection is meant to be, because it is in that first century Jewish mindset. The resurrection is not a myth or a metaphor. It is a very physical reality. The idea is that it is this story kind of gets at it. There's another one, and I forget which gospel it's in at the moment. Um, where Jesus says, "Does anyone have any fish to eat?" And they find a fish to eat, and he eats it in their presence. And the whole point of that is just to stress it's a body. This isn't a ghost. And so that's what I mean by it's the whole resurrection is meant to be this very physical reality of it's not resurrection is not I keep coming up with it's not a ghost. It's not a spirit that is hovering here, even though it's a very different body because it kind of can appear and disappear and go through locked room doors and enter into rooms and they don't recognize it and then they do recognize them. Um,
Yeah.
so it's in seminary we definitely wrestled with what is the resurrection, and it's very bodily. It's a physical reality, and yet it's not just like rewind the tape. It's not resuscitation either, right?
Yeah.
It's not
Mhm.
rewind the tape and it's just Jesus again. Great. Like we just brought him back. Like we just like he still has the holes in his hand. He's got the split in his side still. Some of the scars are still there.
Mhm.
Um, and he's eating and he's walking around, but they don't recognize him. So
Mhm.
it's very peculiar.
That's a
And
good
I
word.
love that when the women are at the tomb
Hmm.
and they think he's the gardener,
Hmm.
and it's like he's just like, standing there, just watching to see what's going to go on, and then
Yeah.
and now, they're like, okay, I mean, I would imagine they'd be going, okay, wait, this looks like Jesus. And it is, right? But wait, he's feeding us. Wait, he's done that before. Who are we
Hmm.
supposed to be feeding? So that
Mm.
was kind of interesting. It's like, oh, who is this?
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
isn't that a question we ask ourselves almost every day? I mean, I do. It's, just how does what's going on today, relate to my faith and my spirituality? And, um, what am I grateful for? Thank you, Jesus. Anyway, it's always a question for me too. Not a
Mhm.
not a bad, like, I don't know this, but it's more of like a joyful question.
Can I tease out of you how would you phrase the question?
Um, the okay, the which part?
You're saying it's a question we ask ourselves today.
Yeah,
You're talking about your faith, and how
yeah.
would you phrase that question?
Um, well, I guess it would be how do I experience Jesus in my life,
Mm,
not just from
yeah,
that vague, um, not just from that vague sense of the divine, but that experience of Jesus,
yeah.
and I've had a couple of interesting experiences along that line, but
Hmm.
it's looking for it's like um when we're told that we may be the only face of Jesus that a person sees in a day. So
Hmm.
how do you want to bring yourself?
Hmm.
And looking at other people and thinking, where where is Jesus? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Lean in that story in the garden too. There's another one of those weird details because
Yeah.
it was probably the earliest apparent account anyway.
Mhm.
Mary Magdalene, and he says out of kind of nowhere, stop hanging on to me. Having it back to the father, she's kind of like grabbing his clothes. It's another
Mhm.
one of those strange things that someone would remember
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense to invent. And I always say that because I am a very skeptical person. So
Yeah.
I'm the resident skeptic in this club.
Yeah. Good.
But those events, yeah, those details are very moving to me.
Mm.
Anyway,
Mhm. And you get at I hear in both of your sharing, Eileen, as you share about how do I bring Jesus to other people? If I'm the face of Jesus today, what is that? How do I want to show up? And Troy saying about don't hang on to me. I'm moving. I'm going back to the Father. Makes me think of that ending of this week's gospel of you got to go feed my sheep, go tend the flock, feed the sheep, and come follow me. There's definitely this emphasis at the end of the gospel reading of um uh it's your turn. You got to do the work, like carry it forward, you know. Yeah, so there's something about resurrection too where it's um what's the right word? Empowers, but also maybe compels us to carry that work forward, that it's on it's now in Peter's hand and the disciples' hands to feed the sheep and do what he did. do the kinds of things that he was doing.
This morning I read a piece by Forward Day by Day. It's Scott, I can't remember his last name, the author.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and he said what he thought was real interesting about this gospel piece is that, Jesus never comes and says, okay, you're safe now. I've got your back. You're going to have the house you want. You're going to have the car. You're going to have,
Right.
Jesus comes and says, care for people,
Yeah.
feed them physically, feed them emotionally, feed them spiritually.
Yeah.
And I hadn't looked at it in that way. And so that was
Mm-hmm.
interesting for me.
Yeah, the 153 fish are probably not for the benefit of the 6 or so disciples who are included in this story, right? I forget how many exactly it is, but it lists them,
Yeah.
right? And then there are the
Yeah.
2 who don't get names. But like the 153 fish, it's too much for 6 people to eat that many fish. I couldn't, we couldn't eat that many fish.
Mhm.
It's to be shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, that abundance is to be shared. Hmm.
It's also a commercial product, though. I mean, it's how he makes a
That's
living.
right.
But
That's
it's
right.
one of those miraculous signs, right? That like,
Hmm.
not get any fish, try that side.
Yeah,
Tons of fish, right? That only a divine being could do that.
right,
He's ex at least implicit, if not explicit, in that scene.
right.
I get
And
moved. I doubt a lot, and so
Mhm.
my faith a lot, and I look at the world and suffering in the world.
Yeah.
And if this event occurred, and there's been plenty of times in my life I have affirmed it, other times I've doubted it, but this event occurred. It's by far the most significant event in human history.
Hmm.
So when I get into these stories and feel that raw, kind of uncarved weirdness that's
Mm.
in there, it's powerful for me.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Mm.
I really liked it when you said, go look on the other side, because it's not on that side of the boat. It's, try that side of the boat. And it struck me that we're asked a lot of the time to go try something new,
Mm.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
was thinking like, oh yeah. Well, if this isn't working for me, I could always try something different. It's like the fear, the anticipation, and the uncertainty of evangelizing.
Mm.
It's like, how do I talk to this person? Oh gosh, that didn't work. Is there something else I could say? So
Mhm.
that's a reminder, try
Mhm.
something a little different.
Mhm. Yeah.
I like that, Eileen. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right.
I do too, because so often we get stuck not trying the other side of the boat, right?
Right.
We just keep mining the same spot, keep doing what we've been doing. Um, and right, I appreciate that too. Mm. Mm.
Coast in Southern California, and one of the best things to do is go to the beach and have a clam. We didn't do a clam bake here, but we would do fish and stuff, and it was always delightful. So
Yeah.
it's like that would be fun. you know
Yeah.
they probably threw some bread on there and toasted a little bit, and I'll bet they had olive oil, and
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is sometimes this gospel reading is called like it's breakfast with Jesus, like and he even has like come have breakfast with me, right? It's this there's something very homey about that. There's something very um average day to day. I'm gonna cough. It's a very close scene, daybreak, having breakfast on the beach.
And I'll bet Peter appreciated that fire because his clothes were all wet.
Ah, ah.
I like how in the beginning, what kicks it off, like what's the purpose of the fish is in the back of my head. But the first thing he says to them is, children, have you any food? And they're out, it says 200 cubits. I don't know how far that is, a couple hundred
Sure.
feet,
Yeah,
something. It says not far, so they could hear him, but he might have to kind of yell it. You have any food?
yeah,
No. Okay. Then comes way more food than they can eat, right? That's
yeah.
like the point of the miracle. And then they come back, and of course, he's already got a fire set up and bread.
And he already has fish.
Does he have fish? Come and eat breakfast. And likewise the fish. Yeah, I don't know if it's their fish or his fish, but
Right. It's an interesting detail where he already has fish, but then he asks them, come and bring some of your fish.
well, yeah, that's leaning into the homiletic application. Is okay.
Right.
I'm not sure whose fish it is, but I'll buy that it could be his, could be theirs. But do you have any food? No.
Yeah.
Oh, way more food than you need.
Yeah.
Come in and I'll cook for you.
Yeah.
It's pretty sweet, man. It's a pretty beautiful scene.
It is. And there's this, I think we've been talking about this play happening between Jesus providing sustenance and then, but then also the human Peter having to also put his skin in the game, I've got these fish already on the fire, but come bring some of your own fish. I'm feeding you, but then Peter, you need to go feed the flock, feed and tend to the sheep, right? And so there's this relationship happening between Jesus feeding and caring and being nurturing, but then that having a relationship to our own need to go out and do the same for others.
That is a great point.
Yeah,
I've always heard this feed my sheep bit, right? And I've heard
right.
different ways that's read, but I never thought about the fact that he says that after he feeds them. They
That's right.
all eat together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think it's interesting that he says, feed my sheep 3 times. And later Peter denies him 3 times. So
right.
that's that. I thought that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's often pointed out as a parallel. Absolutely. That, yeah, and there could be this. I mean, I don't know if I quite even want to give it the term theory, but there's this notion of there's that repairing of the three-part denial, and this is the repair of that. Here's the three-part affirming or something, the three-part reconnecting. Yeah.
And the
Mhm.
disciple who Jesus loved is the one who claims to be the source, or is claimed to be the source for this gospel.
Right. Some
Say
say it's
who it
John.
is, but it's the disciple Jesus loved is the one that sort of prologue to John kind of identifies as the source for that community, I think.
Right.
And it has the weird little earmarks of a memory, a passed down memory.
Hmm.
Wow. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good story. Shall I read it one last time and then we can do any other reflecting that comes to us? I'm going to share it again.
Mhm.
Pull it up here. There we go. Okay. So again, the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses 1 through 19. Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, We will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and he jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there, with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Jesus said to Peter the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." I wonder what Spirit may be speaking to you, for you, in this passage today.
I have heard that in the fear of the disciples, they just went back to do whatever it was they did because that's how they knew to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And here is Jesus, I just imagine him, like with his hand on his shoulder or holding his hands and looking at him and saying, "It's not time to go back to fishing. It's time to feed the people that are following with us."
Mm-hmm.
And especially in this time in our country when
Mm-hmm.
it looks like we're going to have so much need, is like, how do I follow what he's asking us to do?
Yeah. Yeah. That connects with what you shared earlier of how often we keep going back to what we know, and then Jesus says, "Try the other side," right? And they have to try something new to experience the abundance, right? It makes me think of that comment earlier in our conversation.
Well, I love that it's, do you have any food? No, come on in, let's eat together.
Yeah.
And then it's easy to see that three-part test, as a counterpart. I don't know, foil to
Yeah.
three-part um, denial.
Hmm.
And if the story ended there, feed my sheep, it's such a happy ending, right?
Yeah.
Then he throws in this.
Yeah.
Guess what? Okay, so like you're back on board, Peter, right? Yes, you jumped, you swam to shore, you brought in the fish, we all ate together in front of all these people. You said I love you 3 times. I'm telling you to feed my sheep 3 times, but guess what?
Hmm.
When you're old, people are gonna do things to you you don't want to have done.
Yeah.
Heavy, man. It's just heavy.
Hmm.
And then it ends with follow me, regardless. And then John ends in the next little piece. I didn't realize this was almost the end of the book.
Yeah.
You know, and ends at this scene sort of. Yeah,
But I
what
love that you brought that in, Troy, because you're right. And the fact that Jesus, the fact that the story kind of ends on that note of like, okay, you're on board, but that also means that it's not going to go well for you at the end. Hangs over that come follow me, right? Because they have just witnessed where Jesus's path led him, which was to crucifixion, right? And so it's not a um keeping that detail in mind, keeping that sentence or 2 sentences in mind really shapes that final phrase, come follow me. Because it's not, it's not come follow me as we ride off to the sunset and live happily ever after. That is not even though we sometimes can want that, and Hallmark Church can make it sound like that of like, oh, just follow Jesus and everything's gonna be okay. And that sentence or 2 sentences, whatever it is, right before is meant, I think, meant to remind us that the come follow me it's got an edge to it. It's it's not all hunky dory. That's what's coming up in my head. Um, it has a um difficulty to it, and that difficulty is being named in the midst of a resurrection story, meaning they also know that, okay, come follow me. Well, the road he walked down led him to the cross. Yes, that's dark and that's brutal. Um, and God has shown that God is bigger, stronger, triumphant over even the most brutal death that they can conceive of. For them, crucifixion, if not it's certainly one of the top most brutal deaths, humiliating, horrific, not just for Jesus, but for anyone. I mean, imagine walking down the street and you're just seeing bodies hanging on wood. I mean, we would be deeply traumatized if we walked down the street and saw that because uh yeah, I forget what context I was in, but somewhere recently in the last week or two, I was talking about reminding people that crucifixion is not a unique event to Jesus, right? This is a common Roman punishment system. Like they would have been doing crucifixions in Italy and Spain and North Africa. It's not just something that's happening outside of Jerusalem. And so it is like, um, but right, this horrific thing, and in the context of this resurrection story, we're also being affirmed, communicated that God's love, God's power, whatever you want to say, um, is triumphant, is bigger than even that, even this really horrific thing. Um, you know, so the come follow me is complicated for sure. It is not a nice like let's ride off to the sunset together, you guys. This let's just make this happy. Yeah.
Even the do you love me is a little edgy, right? If you think of it
Hmm.
as Peter being picked out
Yeah.
because and that tradition that he denied Christ shows up in other places, and it seems
Hmm.
to have been invented. I don't know. So that's right where Jesus goes, at least in the part we have, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you're here. Hey, you.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's implied in that do you love me thing. What a
Right.
powerful thing. And I do not know how commonly men in the first century said this to each other.
Right.
You love me, but it's
Hmm.
not common among colleagues now.
Nope.
I mean, maybe it is in the church. I don't know.
No.
But
No.
places, it's a strong word.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
true. I don't know the answer to the historical question, but you're absolutely right. Like, it is an interesting, if we think about Christianity in our modern world, um, a lot of Christianity has a very warped sense of masculinity because it's heavily influenced by culture. But
Mhm.
what we're witnessing in this scene is a very tender moment between two men. And vulnerability is happening, and um, I mean, at least, I mean, vulnerability on both sides, because at least the first time Jesus answers the question, there's the possibility Peter's going to say no. There's that.
Mhm.
And in theory, yes, Peter says, you know everything. Jesus already knows the answer, maybe. I'm not going to go down that road, but there is that if we just stay with the story and not add all the theology on top of it, you have Jesus being vulnerable. Do you love me, Peter? And the answer could be no. It could be rejection. It could be not really. I like you, but love's a little strong, Jesus. Um, and then Peter's vulnerability by the third time where he gets annoyed, that tells us that there are other feelings going on there. Anger is regularly a secondary emotion, that underneath anger there's often something like either sadness or fear or hurt or embarrassment, like, and anger often covers other feelings. And so he's annoyed because, and I wonder what the text doesn't tell us, but I wonder what else is he feeling? Is he feeling insecure? Jesus doesn't really believe me. Does he feel sad or worried, or is he embarrassed that he is getting singled out? Jesus isn't asking everyone else this question. Why am I getting singled out? And so there's vulnerability in both of these characters, these two male characters, as they're having a tender moment together. And you're right, Troy. Our current culture is certainly not that between men. Um, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, he's challenging him, but at the same time, and to sort of like ask again,
Yeah.
that's almost crazy. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it with each time he poses the question, it kind of like triples the stakes, the emotional stakes, right? Because
Yeah.
you love me, what do you really love me? Like, well, yeah, you think I'm lying?
Right.
I'm
Right.
lying? No. Do I? Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I love how the whole thing centers around food. That's my concluding. Have any food? No. Let's eat. Got
Let's
it.
see. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And the go feed other people, right? It's all about food
Yep.
at some level. Um, which, as Eileen said earlier in our conversation, is physical, but also spiritual and emotional. I mean, feeding happens on so many levels. But yeah. Hmm. Do you have any final thoughts, Eileen, you want to share before we wrap up? You don't have
Um,
to, but
no, I'm always interested, Troy, when you talk about, I could see this being real, like this is so different, than how other people talk about things, but it's like, this is really real, and so I think I just appreciate that. Thank you.
That is very hard for me. I mean, what was it, 15 years ago, maybe 12, 15, I was sort of becoming a priest myself. I was really interested in New Testament studies, which I still find very interesting and would be a fascinating thing to do a degree in just for the heck of it.
yeah.
But underneath all that, I think somewhat healthy intellectual curiosity is also a lot of doubt and fear.
Yeah.
Like, because the Christian story is sort of like saying, okay, you look out at the world and it's a mix of the really good and the really bad.
Yeah.
And innocent people will do suffer all the time.
Yeah.
And so, but the Christian story is like, well, but behind that,
Yeah.
somehow there is this supreme loving presence. That is a radical claim.
Mm.
And it is rooted in these clusters of historical stories. So I'm willing to believe anything in the Bible's wrong. I don't think the whole thing's right. But when I
Yeah.
run across something like this, it 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 sinks in and settles in.
Mm.
I mean, I hate to quote C.S. Lewis, everyone quotes C.S. Lewis, right? But when he started reading the Bible again as an adult, he said, I've been reading mythology my whole life.
Mm.
He had. He was reading Greek and Latin. He read all that more than
Mhm.
I've read in all the ancient stories. And this just felt different to him, and it feels
Mm.
different to me too. These kind of details bring it alive, and I appreciate that. So thanks, Eileen.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Mm. I love it. I don't have any wise thoughts, so I'm going to bring us to a close. But thank you both for being here. I think this was a lovely discussion, and I'm going to close up our recording. Thank you for participating today.
Okay, see you next time.
See you next time.